All right, record is on. Welcome to negotiating your space, negotiating your space, a lunch and learn webinar. Let's see, I wanted to start. I have PowerPoints for you, and I will share all of these PowerPoints with you as a presentation via email. Even if you're watching this as a recording and you want copies of the PowerPoints, just send me an email and I'm happy to send you this information. So let me share the PowerPoint so you can kind of see what we'll cover. Again, anytime you want to ask a specific question, you have a number of ways to do that. If you are live, you can raise your hand using Zoom. You can turn on your microphone and just get my attention and ask the question. It probably will benefit the rest of us. Or if you're watching this as a recording, just email me. I'm so open to answering your questions because a little bit about me, which is here on the slides, and just by shaking your heads, can you guys see the slides okay? Some of you turned off your cameras, but just want to, okay, good. Thank you, Sonia. You're my girl. A little bit about me. I've been in healthcare, a practitioner of East Asian medicine for over 20 years. And done a lot of consulting, consulted with over 2,000 practitioners in the last 15 years, a professor at Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. But in between, in my past life, I had a business degree and I did commercial real estate for 6 years in San Diego County, and I specialized in medical office space. So I have a lot of information to share with you on strategies on negotiating your space and also just strategies on your space. And I hope that it's going to be very, very helpful for you. So I come from just a place of wanting to help you and make sure that you're successful. The takeaways from today's webinar, we are all of these bullet points and maybe even more that come out. I've done this webinar a few times. I've done it live, recorded like this, and I always get some interesting, unique questions. So we might have some different takeaways, but what I have planned are the best type of scenarios for your practice, you know, right now in the future. If you just graduated, I have a lot of people come to me and say, I just graduated, what should I do? And I usually say, go rent somewhere. Like, you know, it is expensive, and any of you that have done it, you can type into the chat. We do have a chat here on our Zoom. To start your own practice, you're looking at $5,000 to $10,000. Even if you go on Craigslist and get used furniture pieces or go to IKEA and furnish everything, it is expensive to start your own practice. It's risky. We sign leases and that sort of thing. So when you're first coming out, I usually say, go somewhere and rent and make sure you like that geography, you like that location, and make sure you can learn from where you're renting, kind of the ins and outs of having your own space. Very, very helpful that way. Good. Okay. So takeaways: the best lease arrangement for you now and in the future, the best lease length for you. When I was in commercial real estate, everybody used to always come to me and say, East, we need a small space for now, but you know, we don't want to sign any more than like a 1-year lease because we're going to grow. I'm always going to encourage you to sign a longer length lease because time goes by so fast, and yes, you will grow, but you want to bust out of the seams before you plan on moving. By signing a long-term lease, for many of you, that might be a 3-year lease. That might feel very scary, and I would always encourage you to sign a 3-year lease because 3 years goes by like that, I promise you. And you're going to get concessions that we're going to discuss in today's webinar if you sign a longer term lease. If you sign a 1-year, the landlord is already thinking this person's going to be out. I'm going to have to redo the space, remarket the space. There's a lot of expense in that. And so they're not going to give you concessions. Concessions usually are free or build out.
Just hang out for like 30 minutes.
If somebody is, I'll see whose phone number that is. Okay. So again, just mute your microphones unless you have a question. I just want to make sure we don't distract. Okay, perfect. All right. So what concessions can you ask for? I was kind of going into that perfectly. Guess what? One of the things, the biggest mistakes I see practitioners like you and I make is we leave a lot of money on the table. I promise you a landlord isn't going to tell you, hey, if you sign a long-term lease, like 3 or 5 years, I will give you this, this, this. They don't often give you that information because they're a landlord. So they'll usually, in negotiations, when you teach negotiations, this is the number one rule of negotiations. Let the other person speak first, always. So you'll notice when you're talking with a leasing agent or a landlord, they'll say things like, what's your budget? Think about when you go to a car dealership. They don't say, oh, we're going to give you this. This is the best deal we have. They're going to say, what's your budget? Landlords aren't too much different than that, especially when we're talking about larger office buildings. They'll kind of say, what's your budget? How long can you sign? And so let's say you say, okay, I'll sign a 3-year lease, and you didn't have this webinar, and they're like, great, okay, these are the terms. And you don't even know that you can ask for at least 1 month of free rent for every year of the lease. That is kind of standard industry. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has to. There's no laws out there. This is just kind of like industry standard. The majority of landlords will give these types of concessions with these lengths of leases. And then it really depends. Is it a small, what we would call a Class C office building, or a Class B or Class A? We'll talk about that. But I just want to know, like, just a general rule of thumb, if you had to pop off this webinar real quick, something to take with you is if you sign a 3-year lease, there is no reason why you can't ask for 3 months of free rent, or we sometimes call that rental abatement. And if you sign a 5-year, 5 months. Sometimes the landlord is a little afraid of giving you that free rent for so long. So then you could say, hey, listen, I want to have 3 months of free rent for the 3 years of a lease that I'm signing with you. And if you want, we could do that in half rent. So instead of giving me 3 months, because that landlord's just like you, that landlord needs to bring in revenue and not take so much of a loss. So you could offset that by telling the landlord, hey, here's a great strategy. I would like 3 months of free rent because I'm signing 3 years. And how about you just give that to me in half rent for 6 months? So there's a lot of strategies. Hold on, I've got so many for you. And again, here's the East Pete for you. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. Hopefully I see it. If I don't see it, you can get my attention by turning on your microphone and then asking me the question. You can also type it over here like Elk is. Where in the lease, the first 6 months? So in the lease, when they draft up a lease, they will put in what your lease rate is. And so they'll usually put like a little Excel spreadsheet in there on, the first month, second month. They could do a graduation of your rent, or they'll write it out in the paragraph just to say that you will have rental abatement equal to, and so forth. So hopefully I answered your question, Elkie, but you can answer a question, type it a little bit more, or again, when we get into concessions, raise your hand and ask it verbally so I get it all. Buying your own building or space, and I think we even have a landlord at this webinar, and that's going to be great to get that kind of perspective as well. So any landlord questions, I have represented both tenants and landlords. What does that mean, represented? So usually a landlord owns an office building and will hire somebody, a commercial real estate agent, to represent them and go get them tenants. And so that agent represents the landlord. Now, sometimes you will see a sign on a building and call, and that agent now represents you and the landlord. And so that gets a little tricky because that landlord is the one that's paying that agent. You usually don't pay the agent. A commission is paid to that agent from the landlord. So what I tell a lot of times with people, if they come and consult with me, I'll say, listen, I can save you money on your lease by having you represent yourself. Because you can go to the landlord and say, listen, I'm not bringing a commercial real estate agent with me, which means you're going to save 3% of a commission. And how is commissions decided? I'll share that with you. So let's say you're going to sign a lease. It's $1,000 a month for 3 years. That total amount of your lease is worth $36,000 for the length of that lease. That's not even including when you have increases every year, which are very standard. So let's just do that. $36,000 is the total gross consideration of your lease. The landlord is expecting to pay 6% commission on that. That is the going rate, typically. Some areas are a little different, just like residential real estate. There is a buyer side and a seller side. Each side gets about 3%. Some landlords say, if you're going to represent my building, I only pay 5% commission. It doesn't matter. The point here is that the landlord is already expecting to pay a commission on both sides. So if you come in and you don't use the agent as a dual agent, right, the landlord's representative, and you come in and you say, listen, I'm going to represent myself. And if you want, any of you, just email me and say, East, can you send me a proposal? And I will give you a proposal that you can use. It's a commercial real estate proposal that you can submit representing yourself as an offer to lease, and say, instead of me having an agent and you having to give that agent 3%, I'd like to ask for more free rent. And the landlord will look at it and say, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense, because now this person's representing themselves. I have to pay my agent 3%, and that extra percentage, I will give a little bit of it to the tenant. It might even be a little less than what a full commission would be. So we'll talk, we can talk more strategies. Maybe you have a specific situation there, but I have helped people save thousands of dollars by representing themselves. What if there's an agent representing? There's always an agent representing the owner. So usually in commercial real estate, there is an agent that represents the landlord, the building, and then there's an agent that represents you. There are people out there that only it's called tenant representation. They go out there and they will put, you'll see their ads on Facebook, or not Facebook, Craigslist. A lot of times they'll put like little office spaces on Craigslist to get you to call them, and then they'll say, I'll find you a space. And you're like, oh, awesome. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't. It's right, because the landlord will pay them that commission. And they're happy to help you. And you know what? If you don't want to deal with it and writing up proposals and all that, totally fine. And that's great. Use them. You don't pay them. The landlord pays them. The landlord is expecting to pay their own building representative, their real estate person, 3%, and your representative 3%. Now, sometimes it's one and the same. It's just like houses. Sometimes you have somebody that's selling your house for you and they want a 6% commission, but they'll split that commission with the buyer's agent, that kind of thing. Same thing with real estate. What if there's an agent? Do you have the same leverage? Okay, she gets it. Is there benefits to having your own agent? Yes, I would say there's definitely a benefit to having your own agent over using the landlord's agent. Okay, so this is the knowledge that's powerful. I want you to take this information and put it right into your wallet. And that is, if you do, in fact, engage with the landlord's agent, okay, that landlord's agent usually is going to get only 3% of that commission. But if that landlord's agent is representing you and the landlord, then maybe you can use that as a negotiation technique and say, hey, listen, I'm aware that normally you would get 6% on this. And so I'm not bringing an agent in here, so you're going to get the full commission. So I would like to ask for 1 more month of free rent or whatever. Look at what that comes out to be and see if they'll negotiate it in there. And usually that agent wants to make the deal, and the agent will tell the landlord, okay, I'll take 4% instead of 6%. And that 2% that I would have gotten as commission, go ahead and give it to this person as free rent or tenant improvements, anything to make the deal. It's all negotiations, and it all just comes down to a bottom line number. So again, the takeaway here is the landlord is expecting to pay about 6% commission on your gross consideration of your lease. They're already expecting to pay that, and they're already expecting to pay a couple or 1 month of free rent for every year that you sign. Usually they don't offer that unless you're signing 2 or 3 years or more. In medical office space, which we don't really need in acupuncture, they usually see leases 5 and 10 years, because we all know how expensive it is, and equipment and building out our space specific to us, that a lot of times medical professionals don't move. So they do sign longer leases. So, okay, let's go a little bit more into, I gave you a little bit about me. Anytime, like I said, raise your hand, turn on your microphone, and just ask the specific question for you. I do have questions and answer section at the very end, but I'm going to go through these and keep going forward until I get some questions from you. Discussion topics: commercial real estate basics, selecting the right type, various lease lengths, concessions, and your Q&A. Landlords and tenants, I think you know what that is. Landlord owns the building. You are the tenant. Leases and subleases. What is a sublease? What a sublease is let's say ABC Medical Group leased out this beautiful office space for 10 years, and 5 years into it, they don't want to be in business anymore. The partners got in a fight, which happens all the time, and they decided to let it go, but they have a lease with the landlord. So usually in your lease, it gives you a right to sublease, and I want you to make a note of that. You definitely always want a clause in your lease that gives you the right to sublease your space. Usually the landlord will say, okay, if you're going to sublease, I need to approve whom you sublease to. That's fine. But you want to have the right to sublease, because let's say you have a baby and you want to be able to sublease your space to another practitioner, or you want to bring in another associate and you want to be able to sublease space to somebody. Definitely get that. So back to ABC Company, they have this lease. What do? So the landlord's like, well, you signed a lease with me. As far as I know, you owe me $10,000 a month. ABC Company can put an ad out or even hire a representative, commercial real estate representative, to find somebody to kind of, you're not necessarily taking over the lease in a sublease. No, the main person, the main ABC Company still has the lease with the landlord. Now you have a sublease with ABC Company. So I know sounds like kind of tricky, but here's the jewel in a sublease. And I often have helped people look on Craigslist or different search engines like that and find a sublease, because a lot of times a person with a sublease situation they negotiated a really good rate years ago. So you're going to get a really good rate. It might be beautifully built out. Like if you go do a search, sublease medical office space, medical office space sublease, you might find a really great deal of a space that is already built out just the way you'd want it, with sinks in every room, medical treatment spaces, and just gorgeous waiting room. And you didn't have to negotiate that or have a landlord build that out for you. And with the sublease, like I said, it might have been negotiated years ago, so it's a low rate, or the people that are on the hook for the lease get desperate and they put a really low rate just to get somebody in there, so they stop the hemorrhaging of their money. So subleases are a great way to go. And then just know that after that sublease is over, you'll have to sign a direct lease with that landlord. Is there any benefit to having your own? Okay, just making sure I got all this. Okay, so commercial real estate representation, pros and cons of representing yourself. The pro is that you can ask for that anticipated commission for yourself. Now, you can't say, can you pay me a commission? You're not a real estate professional, but you can say, hey, I understand you would probably have to give a 3% commission to somebody. That 3% on my gross total consideration for a 3 or 5 year lease comes out to be about $18,000, or let's say probably more like $4,000. So instead of you paying an agent $4,000, what if you just give me another 2 months of free rent on top of the other free rent? It's all negotiation. These are just more things that you can negotiate for yourself. What isn't on my slides, but I'm going to interject here right now, and it goes back to everything I've ever learned about buying something, is when you are looking at a space, you better love it. I mean that, especially if it's expensive. Especially if it's expensive. Because if you get a space that's expensive and you don't love it, and you're writing your check every month, or you're doing your Zelle or your debit to pay the landlord, and you're seeing that high price, you're going to be upset. But if you love your space and it's expensive, you'll say to yourself, I know it's expensive, but I love it. I love it. So you absolutely need to love your space. It also affects the experiences that your patients have. I mean that. It's subtle, but if you don't like where you are, you will unconsciously will your patients away so you don't have to go into that space. So please, please love, love, love your office space? What are the different types? We are quasi-medical, meaning acupuncturists, East Asian medical practitioners, massage therapists, we don't necessarily have to be in a quote medical office space. And what is a quote medical office space? Let me tell you what differentiates office space, which you could put, if as long as the building will allow your use, you could usually go into an office space. But what is medical office space? All that means is that there is more parking. Because in medical office space, they expect more people to come in to see a few physicians. They need more parking. So because the landlord, whoever built that property, had to put in more parking and less building, typically medical office space is more expensive than office space. Retail is the same as medical. Retail needs a lot of parking because there's a lot of people coming and going. And so with retail office space, it's usually more expensive because that land, a lot of it was given up for parking. So you're going to spend more money on a retail space. Also, the landlord thinks you're going to get a lot of foot traffic. You're going to spend a lot more on medical office space and you might not need it. And then office space, we have classes of office space. A class C is kind of like a mom and pop owns the building. It's not super nice. There might not even be an elevator. It's stairs. The parking is okay. You know, maybe 3 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet or 4 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet that you are leasing. A B building may have elevators and have like maybe nice restrooms, maybe have water into each of the spaces. And then a class A is where you might have a doorman, you'll have a gym in the building, you'll have conference rooms available for you. So you can imagine as we go from C to A being more premium, you're going to pay more for that. It just goes to a choice for you. I can't say that one of those is better than the other. It just really depends on what kind of space you want to have for your patients and for yourself. But I will say this is so important. Wherever you decide to lease, make sure there's adequate parking. Because I don't care how amazing and magical you are as a practitioner. If your patients are driving around your building stressed out because they can't find parking, that stress will begin 30 minutes before they're even meant to come see you because they already know, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go there and I'm gonna be stressed out and I'm gonna have to try to find parking. So please, 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 wherever you decide to go, make sure it's easy access, easy to find you, easy parking. Otherwise, you're gonna undo all the benefits that you might do in a beautiful treatment. Just like if you're buying a house or renting an apartment, go to this place during your working hours. So let's say on the weekend you go and you look at this building, you're like, I love this building, I love this space. The agent or the landlord, you start to negotiate, they want you to sign something, say, you know what, let me think on it, let me sleep on this. And then if you know you're gonna work long days on a Tuesday, you go to that office building on a Tuesday, you drive around right in the middle of the day and be your patient for a moment and experience it. Because you might see, oh my gosh, traffic's horrible, or oh my gosh, the tenants around me are horrible. You got to make sure you do that little reconnaissance. Super, super important, just like you would with buying a house or renting a space. Drive the Desire, LoopNet, SearchNet. These are firms that commercial real estate agents use. That's an MLS for commercial real estate. So you might hear that, CoStar or LoopNet. You can go to LoopNet for free. CoStar, you have to pay for that like an MLS, but any of you can go to loopnet.com and do some searching for yourself. Craigslist is great for finding commercial real estate space. Selecting the right space, we talked about that. Class A looks like that. There are some of the benefits. Class B, not so bad, right? We don't put our nose up on Class B. And then Class C, still not bad. It's just more affordable. Class C will allow for shorter term leases, easier to get approved. As you go up, when you get into Class A, they usually won't look at anything less than 2 or 3 years. They're just not interested in having revolving and turning around your tenants. Light industrial is a space that can be really cool, and I've seen people create awesome office locations in what's called light industrial or called flex space. Problem with these guys is right next door you might have buzzsaw machines from a small light manufacturing company. So just be wary of that. But if you'd like to hold a lot of workshops and things like that, this is a great option where you can have big open space, do your workshops, maybe you have a product business, and then you can have some office spaces in the front where you have treatment rooms. And the nice thing about industrial, or what's called light industrial, is it's cheap. You can get it for like $1 a square foot. It's super inexpensive, but you're probably going to have to put in a lot of your own TIs, tenant improvements. Okay, yes. If you need a recording of this, I will send that to you. You just have to shoot me an email, send me the recording, because I think a few people need to leave. I can see, I told you guys, there's so much. Here are these are plus or minus some pennies here on what you might expect to pay. Get everything in writing. So before you leave, Grace, Kim, it doesn't matter if you are moving into your best friend's office space and sharing the space with her, get everything in writing. I could tell you guys stories and we'd be here for 5 hours of people that are like, oh no, I'm just gonna rent from my best friend. She has this awesome extra room. Those friends are not friends anymore. Make sure you get everything into, yes, I will go over that at least, writing. Get everything in writing. Okay, share space, sublease, direct lease, working for somebody else. Look for, let's see here, purchasing your space. Ask for these. Okay. What are triple nets? Triple nets. Triple nets, usually that is like taxes and insurances. Some buildings will say this space leases for $1.50 plus triple nets. What that means is at the end of the year, so at the end of 2019, the landlord adds up insurance, maintenance, all the kind of like things that go into taking care of that building. And it says, okay, it was $100,000 this year, and I have 100 spaces. And so each person will have to pay $1,000 this year in triple nets. So then they would cut that up into 12s. So I know I went over that math quickly, but triple nets are just more rent. So you might say, wow, this looks really cheap. It's $3,000 a month. But if it says triple nets, usually after your first year, so they might let you go the first year without paying any triple nets. And then the next year, they're going to say, okay, you're basically paying the triple nets from the previous year. So let's say you signed a lease in April, because we do have a question from one of our attendees here, signing a lease, April 2018. If there was triple nets on there, they would, after you've been there for a year, you then have to contribute into the triple nets. Triple nets usually are things like 35 to 75 cents per square foot. That's usually around what triple nets, depending on the type of office building you're in. If you're in a really nice one, it could be more expensive. If it's an older building and they're doing a lot of improvements and you have triple nets in that lease, that it might get more expensive. A gross lease means triple nets, everything's in there, there's no more added rent. Hope that helps. Retail locations will sometimes, you really need to read those agreements, because retail locations will sometimes say to you, they always have triple nets, and they sometimes will say to you, oh, and by the way, after you've been here for 2 years, you need to send us a summary of your sales and start paying us commissions on your sales. Some retail locations are hideous, absolutely hideous, and it's all like fine print, and they're not going to point it out to you when you're signing it. You're going to sign it and say, I love it, I'm going to have all this foot traffic, I'm right next to all these big box retailers, and then all of a sudden you get this bill, or they'll say, what were your gross sales? Oh, you owe me a commission on that. Yes, they do it. It's horrible. So always look for that as well. Thank you, Elke. I can send you a recording. I will actually just send the link to everybody. As you can see, there's so much information here. I do want to go over this question and then all the questions. I'll stay, but I know many of you need to leave. This is supposed to be a 30-minute. So thank you so much for anybody that needs to leave. Question, I signed a 2-year lease in April of 2018. My lease is up for renewal soon in 2020. I'm concerned because the landlord for a while, so I know this person, the landlord was had ill health, and the rumor was that they were going to sell the building. As soon as the landlord dies, and inheritance. We're just going to sell the building and make condos. So all the tenants were kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to leave. All the while, the building's dilapidating just like the owner. Well, now things have changed where the tenants were saying, you need to fix the bathrooms in these common areas. And so they are now fixing those areas. They're fixing the building. And now the rumor is that they don't plan on selling it. And now the rumor is that they want to renew everybody. So let me tell you this, if you have a lease to a building, the owner can sell the building, but your lease goes along with it. So when you sign a lease, all the more, if you love where you are, all the more reason to sign as long as they'll give you. Some landlords won't give you longer than a 5-year. Also, if you're afraid of signing a long-term, that's okay. Sign a 3-year with the right to renew that lease for another 3-year. You can ask for that as well. That can be in your proposal to lease. Like I said, if any of you want a proposal, I'll send you a blank one. You can actually use it. It's a Word document and use it for yourself. And you can also just kind of see some of the things that people usually write up in a proposal. This would be good even if you have your own agent, because you can look at what I give you and say, hey, how come you're not asking for the right of first refusal? Right of first refusal says you move into a space and you can only afford this much, but you hope to grow into the spaces next to you, and there are empty spaces next to you, or you have a rumor that the person next to you is going to move someday. You put in a clause that is the right of first refusal. That means if anybody moves out of the spaces next to you, you have first dibs on that space. And you can ask for that. It's called right of first refusal, meaning if these people leave, or let's say it's a blank space next to you, you're moving into a beautiful brand new office building and you only take suite A and you're eyeballing suite B, you could say, I want the right of first refusal on suite B. So if you get an offer on suite B, I get the chance to take it. So you can do that too. It just mitigates your risk of taking that large space. And so that's called right of first refusal, okay? Right of first refusal. Grace says it was very intense but helpful. I know, I think it's definitely more than 30 minutes. So for the person that asked the questions about the lease, they did say this: I love this office location. It's my dream office with free parking. I don't want to move. Don't move. If they're offering you to sign the lease, sign the longest lease you can with the right of, with an option to renew, right? So usually we'll say, I'll sign a 3-year lease with an option to renew that lease for 3 years. Usually when you sign a lease for 3 or 5 years, they will usually put escalations in that, very normal. Usually those escalations are 3 to 5%, totally normal. And if you're a landlord and you're like, can I raise the rent? Yeah, you write that in the lease. It says it in there. And in the proposal that I'll share with any of you that want, it usually says the lease will not increase every month more than 3% or 5%. You can negotiate that as well. What about breaking lease penalties? Yeah, they usually will have some sort of clause in there that says if you break the lease, usually, well, a lot of landlords won't even have that clause in there. They don't want you to have that option. And then if you come in and say, can I put a break the lease clause in there, then the landlords get scared. Think if you were that landlord. You can have a break the lease clause written in there, but make it fair. So usually how I've seen people break a lease successfully is a number of ways. One, you can say, listen, I have to break the lease for whatever reason. Why don't I pay you back whatever concessions you gave me? So let's say you signed a 3-year lease and the landlord gave you 3 months of free rent. Maybe you go back and say, listen, I'm going to break my lease. Here's the 3 years back of free rent, or 3 months of free rent back. Or let's say you signed a 3-year lease or even a 5-year lease. They gave you 5 months of free rent and $5,000 to build out your space. So you break the lease and you might say, okay, listen, I'll pay you back the $5,000. That's another concession that you can ask for. When you move into a Class B, Class C, and even a Class A, you can ask the landlord to build the space out for you. It just comes down to how much is it going to cost, and you just negotiate that. So a landlord will look at the costs, and if you say, I'll stay there for 5 or 10 years, usually they'll give you, I know when I did a lot of commercial real estate, let's say you signed a 5-year lease. A lot of times they'd give you 5 months of free rent and $5,000 to build it out how you wanted to. So maybe one room's too big and one room's too small. You want to move a wall, you want to add a door, create a reception area. They will do that for you just as long as it's fair and they know that you're going to be there long enough. So some of the penalties will be, what about signing personally versus under a business? It really doesn't matter if you sign under your business or a person, because legally they would just go after whatever entity signed that building. So if it's personally or business, I don't think there's really any benefit to that. The only benefit might come into having liability insurance, which most of you will have to have. If you're going to rent from a building, they're going to ask you to have insurance so that if anything happens in your space, that you're covered. So don't they tack on build out expense over the life of the lease? They can do that as well. James, thank you for bringing that up. Sometimes it's all a negotiation. So there's not one way. You can go to a landlord and say, I want this build out. They get an estimate. The build out's going to cost $10,000. You don't have it. So you can ask the landlord, hey, you have the resources, you have the contractors and everybody in your pocket. So will you pay for that $10,000 and then just split that up over 5 years and put that into my lease rate? Yes, they will sometimes do that for you. But if you sign a long enough lease, they will sometimes pay that for you, or a good portion of that, because every landlord, just like a house, if you move out, they know they're going to have to clean the floors. They're going to have to paint the walls. So when you're moving into a new space, at a minimum, at no extra cost, that space should be delivered to you beautifully. No marks on the walls, clean walls, clean light fixtures, that whole thing. If you're going to do some improvements to the space and make it nicer, you could say, hey, listen, my husband's a contractor, or my girlfriend's a contractor, or my best friend's a contractor. They're going to come in here and cut me a really good deal. They're going to make this space beautiful, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord. So because I'm using my own people, can I get a reduced rate? Because basically I'm making your space more beautiful. So this happened for me. I had a client who went in and put recessed lighting, gorgeous recessed lighting, changed all the room into like beautiful modernized fixtures, put a sink in because her husband was a contractor. So improved the space. So she was able to negotiate with the landlord a lower rate, because the landlord felt like even when she leaves, he now has, or she had, a more improved office space that could demand a higher dollar later on. So they were willing to do that. Everything's a negotiation. I really want you guys to get that you can negotiate so many things in there. My accountant told me to now sign for it personally in case something happens to me. Got it. Then they don't go after your business. So yeah, with something like that, signing with you or your business, ask accountants for that. Let me see if there's other things. So there's right of first refusal. Always ask for that. Always ask for the right to sublease your own space. Tip number 2, look for subleases. I already gave you that. Less out-of-pocket expense. Lease lengths. You can do less than 1 year, 1 year, 3 years. Notice it's big and bold. I think that's the sweet spot. If I were renting a space, if I was going in, I would do a 3-year with an option to renew for another 3 year. If you can get 2 options to renew, even better. So great. Usually what you want to put in your lease or in your proposal to lease or have it be in there is that when you exercise, when and or if you exercise your option to renew, you do it at the fair market value. So what that means, like, let's say you rent a space and in 3 years, you know, it says that every year it'll go up 3%, totally normal. You've rented it for 3 years. Now you're going to renew your option. If you don't have something that says, when I renew my option, it's at the fair market value, then what if lease rates have gone down and they're going to hold you to that old high rate? I always recommend, it's kind of hard. I don't have a crystal ball on the real estate. I don't think anybody does. And so I usually say, just have it say an option to renew at the fair market value, at the going rate of that time, versus staying where you're at a trajectory of 3%, because lease rates might be lower. I hope that helps you guys there. 5 years is great. If you don't think you're going to leave, like the person that asked this question, I know your situation. I know you want to be there. I'd say sign a 5-year because you want to control your real estate. Definitely you want to control that real estate. If you can buy your own office building and then lease out, that's even better. If you really, really love, 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 love where you're treating and you love the building and it goes for sale and you can somehow get the money to buy it, I would highly recommend it. Real estate is an amazing investment, especially for people like us, because we're not at an office corporation that gives us a 401k or retirement. That office building could be that, and then you're going to control everything and everybody around you. All right. I can't believe it's 12:41. I wanted to see what other questions can I ask for you. You can type them in, turn on your cameras, your microphones, ask me. I want you guys to know that I created a continuing education course on all this material. It's called Commercial Real Estate for Healthcare Professionals. It's on my website. It gives you 2 CEUs and it's $20. So if any of you are like, oh my gosh, I need 2 CEUs, $20 is less than I spend at Starbucks, go to my website, buy the course, and it's all this information. I think I put this here as a special for you. I just offer that. I didn't do this webinar to sell anything. I just like to offer you guys something, and I don't know about you, but I can always use some extra CEUs. Deb, so great to see you yet again. I hope that helped. James, let's hear your question.
Hi, Dr. East. If you don't mind, I'd like to get on cam and ask this question instead of typing it. It's a long
I love it.
Just to go back to Elise's question about signing personally or having to give a personal guarantee versus a professional. I'm in my 4th location. I've been in practice for about 18 years now, and I've moved locations several times. The first office I had, we didn't have to sign personally. And so it was a 5-year lease. They did the build out and they tacked on the expense of the build out over the life of the lease. But the building really was a terrible building. And after 3 years, we decided to break. So what we did, the good news was we had the foresight to form a shell corporation that signed the lease. And so we just basically closed up the corporation. And we broke our lease 2 years early. Now, ever since then, all my future locations all required a personal guarantee that was non-negotiable. So my question was, what's your experience with that? Do you notice that most buildings require a personal guarantee?
Well, yes, because put your feet in the landlord's shoes. If you move out, they have to find somebody else. They have to pay commissions. They have to build it out. They lose rent. So most landlords will ask for that, the personal guarantee, because it's easier for them to go after that. But every landlord can get desperate. So there are times when a landlord has a building and they're not getting somebody to lease it. You might have the advantage if there aren't a lot of people looking at that space and you say, I don't want to personally guarantee it. I want it to go through my business. And they're like, okay, well, that's when the landlord will talk to the agent and the agent will say, listen, landlord, you got nobody looking at the space. This is it. You might want to take it. So landlords, just like you, can accept anything. So always go in and ask for a lot. That's one thing I didn't say. So anybody watching this recording, and maybe I'll type this in the notes, is the best thing to do when you're going in as a tenant is just ask for everything, knowing that they're going to say, we can't give you all of this. And then they're going to take away a few things, but what you're going to end up settling on is probably your dream situation. So to your question, I do see that most landlords are asking for a personal guarantee. And as was mentioned by Elise, that the accountant said, don't personally guarantee it. But if the landlord, they have the right to not rent to you. So it might end up hurting you in finding your space. In that case, if you're afraid to personally guarantee it, then maybe sign a shorter term, that sort of thing. I wish I had the easy answer, but yeah, there's no law on it. It's like when somebody owns real estate, just like a house, they can rent it to whom they want. There's nobody that that requires it, but most of them require that. Most of them require it. Yeah. Does that help, James?
No, it does. Thank you. Yeah, I think in the beginning it was more of a fear factor of, what if my business doesn't succeed and I'm stuck with a lease for many years? But now after, 18 years, I'm not worried about that part of it. So,
So can you
um,
share light like on somebody that might be sitting here and they're afraid to sign a 3-year lease? Would you agree with me that the 3 years goes by so fast and you're like,
oh,
holy
so
cow, I've been
fast.
here 3 years?
It really does. It really is. That shouldn't be the factor because you want to, plan to succeed in your business. And if you like your building and you like that, you like the location and you've done your homework, it, you know, unless you're a terrible, terrible business person, you'll manage. And it's just a fear basically.
It
It's a
always is. And when we go past that fear and then we go, oh my gosh, I've been here forever and stuff. Another thing that comes to my mind was a girl I worked with who putting a practice in a funky, let's say out of the box environment might not be the best idea. So case in point, her best friend owned a beautiful salon, a hair salon. And she had this room kind of in the back that wasn't being used. And she said, oh my gosh, you're just starting your practice. You ought to put your practice in my hair salon. I have so many people that come in here and they're very affluent. They're very, wealthy people. So you're going to be booked solid. And she's like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. And so she came to me, what do you think? I said, absolutely not. A hair salon? And she goes, oh no, it's great. It's hip. It's fun. We're best friends and all. Okay. So she spent $5,000 to build out this room in the hair salon to soundproof it. But here's the thing. People would come in and have this beautiful experience with her. And as they walked out, they got blow dryers in the in the head, and they got the smell of acetone from the nail salon. Oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. Then her best friend all of a sudden said, hey, why didn't you clean the bathrooms last night? She goes, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, if you're going to be here, you have to clean the bathrooms every Tuesday and Thursday. We all pitch in around here. And she's like, wait a second. You didn't tell me how to clean the bathrooms. Well, you do. And this was after she spent $5,000 and she was already in. That's why I said get everything in writing. And in addition to cleaning the bathrooms, I want you to go out and hand out flyers for the salon every Saturday. And this girl that came to me is like, East, what do? I said, you move out of there. So she did. And she spent about $10,000 to build out her own beautiful single space. It's gorgeous. And you know what? She was so happy. And she signed a 5-year lease by the beach with an ocean view. And sadly, she's no longer friends with that girl. But that's the same thing like gyms, clubs, things like that. People say, oh, my friend's going to cut me a deal. This is where I'm a trainer. I did that too. I had an office in a health club where I was a group fitness instructor. And I thought, great, all my patients will come from all my participants in my classes. Problem was, my people would get really relaxed and then they'd have to walk out past the racquetball courts. And they're like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Pick a beautiful, tranquil space that you love. Do you have a sample for subleasing? The subleasing samples would be the same as the proposal that I'll send all of you guys. I have no problem sending it. I'll send you guys just like what I used to use for a proposal to lease space. It's just an intention, you put it out there. It's not binding. The only thing that's binding is a lease, but I can send you that as well so that you guys can do it. I've given that to people. I've worked with people. We wrote up their proposal. They submitted it. And so that proposal said, hey, because I'm representing myself, I'd like to ask for an extra month of free rent or even a half a month of free rent. If that's $1,500 back in your pocket or $3,000 in your pocket, that's worth it. Totally worth it. I'm binding. Yeah. What other questions might you guys have? I want to make sure I cover all of those. And I also don't want to keep you too long. It is your lunch and it is Friday. Anything else? Like I said, I wanted to cover all questions. These are the specific. I think I've covered everything in here. One new question. Oh, great info. Okay, I hope it was. It was meant to be just, a little bit of something. If you want more detail, we can talk at great lengths about your specific situation. I am normally $175 for a 1-hour session. If you email me and say, East, I was at this webinar or I watched the recording, I want your discount of $150. I'm totally fine with that. I have a big event coming up in January 2020 here in San Diego called Recharge. You can see the event on my website. It's $198. You get 15 CEUs, and you can bring a friend for $100. So for $298, two of you can both get 15 CEUs and be healed. You're going to have yoga, sound bath, meditation, all kinds of amazing things at that event. Just want to make sure you guys have that. All right, guys. I hope to see you at future events. My next Lunch and Learn is Burnout Strategies. I am halfway through my second book, and the book is all about what do I do? I'm burned out. What do I do? Because guess what? We all burn out. So I have some strategies that are in my book that I'll share with you next month. I will do Lunch and Learns every month. You can look on my website for the next 12 months already scheduled out. And I hope to see all of you again real soon. I'll also be at Symposium here in San Diego in a couple weeks. If there aren't any more questions, I wish you all great success and joy. And this would be just a bye for now. See you soon.